California environmental voters, and today we are speaking with young people who live in California's 49th district to ask them what do they care about and what about climate change concerns them. So question one is, how is climate change showing up in your daily life, and what do you wish more people understood about climate change in your community?
I think that we as an individual have less of an impact on it than multi-billion-dollar corporations and also millionaires. So we have all these things that we try to do individually to change. And it's not saying that doesn't do anything, but I think we need to focus on the root of the issues.
Absolutely. We see like multi-billionaires creating large companies, and when they create these companies, they don't think about the environmental effects of them. Like we talked about nuclear waste a little bit when I was doing research, and we saw that they're not transporting like wasted, spent material safely, and just now we're getting those regulations. And when we see nuclear waste like that, it affects our environment around us. Like we are not supposed to be around that.
I would say like a real life impact of climate change. Like I was in New York last week, and then I went to New York the same week the year before. And both times I was there, it was like record heat waves, and we couldn't go. It was 100 degrees. Like we were doing like all the stuff you do when you go to New York, but it was like 100 degrees, and both times we're like, oh, like this is unprecedented. Like this never happens. But like 2 years in a row now it's happened. So I just think like weather events, like stuff like that, and then like this past hurricane season, that kind of situation. I think every year we're like, oh, like this is unprecedented. Like this never happens. But then like it's happening every year. So I think that's kind of like the most. That's how we're seeing it the most, I think, just in our day-to-day lives, and that's kind of something we're gonna have to get used to and just adapt to.
Yeah. I think that is like, the biggest way that we see climate change day to day is literally like every year for the past 5 years, people have always been saying, wow, it's so hot.
Yeah.
And it's only been getting hotter. There's a quote that I see, and it's like, it's the coldest summer for the rest of your life because it's only gonna get warmer, which is, sad to think about. But yeah, as has been said previously, it's mainly, what I wish more people knew about was that it's not necessarily on the individual, because it's 100 companies that are producing 70% of all like greenhouse emissions, and that's not a statistic that most people know, which would be really important if people that are lobbying for climate legislation and new policies understood that. It might change things, but it depends.
Is it okay if I just say right now? I just like to say that we literally have like changed the scape of like California with human interference and stuff. Like in Palm Springs, for example, we used to have a desert climate, like completely dry, and then added grass and turf and different stuff like that has created a Mediterranean climate. Like we've added humidity into the air. And so we've literally changed the climate of our state just by adding different things in different places, which I think is really interesting. And I think that just shows like how much of an impact our actions can have just on an entire area.
That's true. Like we do have a lot of impact on what does happen with the environment. Also, I wanted to touch on what you said with like all of you said with the heating summers, is that we have to acknowledge that global warming or climate change can go both directions, extremes in both directions. So you have to just keep that in mind. So when we have a super cold winter, that might also indicate climate change. So that's all.
Yeah. I kind of want to draw a comparison between what both of you were saying about like the big corporation stuff, and then how earlier we were saying like, oh, like what we do on an individual level doesn't really make that big an impact. I think that's kind of our job, is to hold those big corporations accountable. If we take in our personal lives like as many steps as we can to kind of help reduce our personal impact of climate change, and kind of if we all did that, I feel like it could do a better job at holding those large corporations accountable and making like a bigger point of their carbon footprint and their climate footprints in that kind of way.
I have a question for you guys. Do you feel like talking to your representatives or getting involved with elections is part of that personal responsibility?
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of the time I do feel like we don't have a whole lot of a voice in changing what the politician believes. It's usually what they believe is what they're going to go for, and then we have to support the one that does believe closest to what we believe. But I feel like definitely in doing that, we can support someone who is more progressive for the environment.
I think that it would be an ideal situation for everyone to be held responsible to reach out and to advocate and to reach out to their local representatives. But I think a lower version of that would be a strong responsibility to be educated and to vote. That way, when you are voting, you know what you're voting for and which candidate supports what you believe in. Because when you're voting uneducated, it's helping no one, it's not helping you, it's not helping your community. So I think that although it would be nice if everyone reached out and took this larger responsibility on themselves, I don't think it's quite realistic. But I think that a lower version of that would be just making sure that every single person takes it upon themselves to be educated.
And I think part of like your question was like our involvement with like the campaign and or not even the campaign, but like in politics. I think getting involved with politics makes you more aware and gives you like a deeper understanding of not only how the process works, but like how your vote does make an impact. So I think our role in that is by getting involved, we're becoming more aware, and by that, making our friends and our families more aware of how their impact just voting or just being part of the community kind of changes that.
And to touch on the second part of the original question, what I wish people were more aware of, I think that around us there's kind of a lack of understanding on what climate change is going to do, even in just our local communities, because with rising sea levels, we'll see more flooding, we'll see communities destroyed. By 2050, it'll be costing billions of dollars in California to be replacing buildings, or just the worth of buildings that are going to be destroyed. And I think there's a lack of understanding of really how much destruction this climate change is going to cause. And I think when people hear, oh, you know, the ocean's rising by an inch or 2 inches, or however much they hear, that doesn't really process of how big of a deal that is.
I also think it doesn't process how quickly they'll have an effect on people's individual lives, because I think we kind of think of climate change as like, it's a really big thing to tackle, but I think a lot of us think of it as, oh, it's in the future, like it won't really have a large effect on our time, whatever, like our like personal lives and our time, like maybe it's like our grandchildren, whatever their issue. But I think if everybody kind of realized how soon climate change is coming and how our actions now can have impact in the short term, I think that would definitely be beneficial to like the issue as a whole.
I wanted to touch on that. I think there's a effect, I forget what it's called, but it has something to do with the bystander effect. And like, to put it into perspective, if you had someone who got injured on the street and there's a crowd of people around them, it's actually likely that none of them are going to call the police if there's multiple of them, because they disperse the responsibility of calling police between all of them. So when you compare that to like climate activism and stuff, you don't get, people don't feel personally responsible. They're like, someone else will deal with it. But if they don't vote for who will deal with it, then they can't have any impact on it.
All right, now this next question is the public transportation one. Do you use public transportation or bike paths? Why are these important to you? And if you don't use public transportation, why do you not use it? And like, what would have to change in order for you to use it? Go ahead.
Okay, I got here on a bike. So I use public transportation, I use bike paths, but I think there's something to be said about the extent that bike paths and public transportation can have. I'm very into the sphere of public transportation, and we do need more trains. We do need more accessible things that aren't just for cars, but we also need infrastructure changes that aren't just public transportation.
I agree, and I think my perspective on public transportation as a whole comes from my time in South Korea this summer, where they literally have the best like transit systems. Like almost nobody owns a car. Maybe they own like a moped, but the subways can get you from like across town to the airport, all this other stuff. And I think it's difficult maybe in our area because it's a little more spread out as like a whole. So like I kind of understand like why it doesn't make sense, but I still think like the trains that go from here to San Diego are super nice. And then before I had a car, I was biking, and I was like kind of an inexperienced biker, so I never felt really comfortable enough to go on the road. So to be honest, like the bike path for me was just like so I could bike to the beach or maybe the gym, but nowhere like really that important. It was almost like only like recreational use. Like I don't think I could get places that I actually needed to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I haven't used public transportation in Carlsbad or the 49th in a very long time. I used it to get to school every day for a few years, but it just wasn't reliable, or you couldn't really use it effectively to get anywhere else besides point A to point B, which is really unfortunate. Much like you, my perspective on public transportation developed a lot when I did a study abroad in Germany. I used public transportation every single day, and it really showed me like how a city can function without cars, which I always held the belief that, you know, you can't have cities without cars. Public transportation is more effective and creates a better community than car-centric ones, but it really showed me that. even in one of the nicer cities of Germany. But that was just, I really think that we should invest more into public transportation and better public infrastructure.
I would say personally for me, my perspective kind of differs because I don't really use public transportation, and I would say that mainly stems from the fact that like I have a walker, and I feel like a lot of public transportation isn't very like accessible for people who have a walker or a wheelchair. So I feel like it just feels like very unsafe for me to go on my own. Like maybe if I was with somebody else, I would feel more comfortable, but like there's going to be a point in my life where I'm going to have to go on mine and get from place A to place B, and it's like a lot more difficult for me because I don't feel safe on it, and there's not very accessible for me, and like I would love to use it, but I think they need to work on that too and like focus on adding accessibility to like public transportations.
By that standard, does that make you prefer a car?
Yeah, for sure. Just because like
Okay.
I prefer like driving myself. I know I can get my walker into the car safely and stuff like that, and I can get from one place to another without feeling like something's gonna go wrong.
Do you feel like young people can cause pressure on their elected officials to get that changed against the auto industry?
Me? Yeah, sorry, my bad. I definitely think that, well, one, I think anyone can, but I think young people, usually they have like more of an ability, at least like for instance, college ones. You have less day-to-day responsibility, so you usually, not always, but a lot of times have more time and ability to organize and take part in movements. So I definitely think they can.
Yeah, and I would say too, like we're like the next generation that's gonna take it all of this on anyways. So I feel like it's on us too to like use our voice and like speak for others too, because we're gonna be the ones like inheriting everything. So we should like be focusing on our future and like the future of like the people with us.
And something that I've noticed a lot of too is that a lot of people in our age group and generation are very fed up with the current way things are, just in general, whether it be public transportation, the infrastructure, the environment, political situation as a whole, the economic situation as a whole. So people are trying to find avenues. One of the most commonly asked questions that I got when answering phones at Senator Blakespeare's office was, what can I do? And I always referred them to their congressional representatives, their senators, and local officials that they could talk to about the issues that they have. So I think that's definitely going to see some change.
Okay, I would just say, I think the biggest thing, like locally, especially in the 49th district, just because like a safety standpoint, I think personally for me, like I did take the coaster. I think kids are they're not against public transportation, especially. I know like a lot of like my peers like taking the train we have here, and they think it's fun to go to the city. But I think a big thing is like safety, like from a parent perspective. That and then e-biking too in the 49th district is really big. But all the bike lanes and the bike paths here generally are next to like 4 or 5 lane road, and cars are going 50, 60 miles an hour. So I know like personally for me, my parents were really concerned about me using public transportation just for my own personal well-being. They'd rather drive me somewhere that they think I could get hurt along the way. So I think just speaking like locally, just bring it down like a local like 49th district level. I think improving the safety around public transportation, kind of what you were touching on earlier, making it more accessible for people of all ages. Because I think if I used it more when I was younger, I probably would continue to use it now and be less reliant on my car.
The last question is, what are the biggest environmental issues you feel are being ignored? We still need two more brave souls. See.
One of the biggest things I'm thinking of is the current AI space. AI has become one of the largest current running things right now. It's become like a thing. We're seeing AI on every website, every like document, like in our daily lives, it's everywhere. But we aren't talking about like the environmental impacts of it. I think I saw a study, and it was like to train an AI bot to like train everything about it. It releases 5 times more CO2 than a car, like an average car trip. So that is like releasing a lot into our environment. And also it takes a lot of water. Like AI uses a crazy amount of water. And I feel like we aren't putting regulations on AI. Like we're just kind of letting that business grow and change. We aren't putting those regulations that I feel like when we have these big environmental things, like when we started with cars, we were just digging up fossil fuels, and only later did we put those like limits and stuff. And now we're seeing the effects of that. I feel like with AI, we need to put these in early, or else it's going to grow to like a bigger problem, kind of.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think we're seeing so many different forms of it. Always. We're seeing ChatGPT and 5,000 different versions of ChatGPT. We're seeing AI art, we're seeing AI photos, like all of this different stuff, and it's just so many different things that cost us so much for environment. I think it's also interesting right now that we have all these issues, we're naming all of these issues, and it's like, what would you do if you had the mic? But even if we look at what they're doing in DC, they're not just not talking about them, they're actually doing the opposite, and they're rolling back restrictions on environmental procedures and all of our Clean Air Acts and water pollution and stopping logging in protected forests. It's all being rolled back instead of going out and advocating for more of these restrictions.
See, I think all of this kind of boils down to like money in politics and like eliminating like the Citizens United like case, so that like what people actually really want is being represented at the highest level. So.
The Make Polluters Pay Act in California, I know that's getting a lot of traction and has a lot of support behind it, but I think going back to the original question of if I had the mic in DC, what would I do? I would start one of those nationally or even internationally. I think there's so much money in corporations, in the billionaires and the millionaires that are actually the ones doing a lot of the main damage. And really they should be the one paying for it, not the average taxpayer. And there's a lot of money from them that they just have from the damage they caused that could go into fixing it. I think that's one of the more important things that I would want to do and bring awareness of.
For sure. Sorry. I was just gonna say, like, I've been thinking about it lately, but not like I understand that the national debt is like a real issue, but I also am a firm believer that we have the money, we just don't like use it smartly enough. So I feel like we can like actually afford like all of these infrastructure changes, just we're not prioritizing like where we actually like put our money.
Okay, I think we have the same thing here. Where is that money coming from? But also, what infrastructure changes do you want made? Do you want to bulldoze and change, or do you want to add and change?
I'm more of like an add and change, because like over time, like it's not gonna happen. Like the Roman Empire wasn't built in one day, and I'm a firm believer in that. So I feel like you can just upgrade like what we do have, and then like over time, like in the next 20, 30 years, it's gonna look completely different than how it did 30 years back, so.
You have something to say?
I just make
Go for it.
So I completely agree, but I also think it's important to realize like with great things come great costs. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of these ideas that we've talked about, very fantastic, love it, but very expensive.
That's true. I think it's a worthwhile investment, but I understand like sometimes like it may not be. But I also think that we do invest in some things that aren't worthwhile as well. So why not this when I think that it's most important now?
I think that also has something to do with taxes, right? So like the Republican Party is recently doing a new tax proposal where they're cutting taxes to the highest earners, to millionaires and billionaires. And so a polluter's pay bill would equalize that. And so that's how you get money. I think there's a question about like things cost money, but if we are also not making revenue, if the federal government isn't bringing in money, then yeah, you have to cut services. But if we bring in money like every other nation on the planet, we could afford these things.
I was gonna add like a small comment saying like yeah, there's a lot of money in debt right now, but like a lot of billionaires, like it's not ethical to be a billionaire, so they have so much money that they didn't get in a like proper way. So like I said, like taxing them would help a lot, and we'd get a lot of money from them because like the way they got their money wasn't even proper anyways, and it doesn't help at all. So taxing them would bring in that money that we need and distribute the wealth that should have been distributed anyways. Yeah.
When you ask for like where you're going to get the money from, it really is a simple answer: just tax the rich. And obviously, then you have to come up with the tax plan and implementing that and getting that through, Congress or whatever. And what you're mentioning with like the housing and creating new laws to make it more expensive, that's one of the big issues with privatization, is that they're not subject to a lot of like legislative oversight or anything. They can kind of act on their own agency, which like has its benefits in some contexts, but in the context of housing, not really, because they can build them super cheap, but then they can really charge whatever they want, which is likely what is going to happen. And so that's where you need to have the government step in. It goes back to Keynesian economics or whatever. It goes back to the Great Depression and all that. And it really is like, it is a very simple answer. People just, there are certain people that just really don't like that simple answer.
All right, you guys, thank you so much. Give yourselves a round of applause. All right, if you're an entrepreneur,